Welcome to the Land Investing Business Secret Podcast, where each short episode we talk about the strategies, experiences, and the tools to help you launch, grow, and scale your land business. Learn how to find freedom within your own business, find out ways to build consistency in your processes, and hear how other everyday land investors are winning so you can get to the next step closer to building your dream life through your land business. And I'm your host of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast by Pebble, Jesse Kwong. Hey, how's it going? It's Jesse from the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. I've got a very different guest here with us today. He comes from the world of mineral rights. And, we deal with land and they deal with land. And there's a lot of interesting things and how he's investing into the underground resources. So it's a very interesting episode here, a totally new world for myself, hopefully for yourself as well. So enjoy this episode here of the Land Investing Business Secrets Podcast. All right, everybody, we've got a special guest, Matt Sands here. He's from a completely different area. Well, not completely. There's an overlap here, and I'm excited to have him on to talk about mineral rights. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Jesse. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump into it. So, how did you get into mineral rights? How did you get started with that? And, what's your backstory and what do you do now?
Sure. So I have a background in the oil and gas industry. I've worked in the industry for about 26 years. I've worked, for major oil and gas operators in different engineering and project roles, management roles. And then about 10 years ago, I went off on my own and started to invest in mineral rights. And that is, and we'll talk a little bit more about that and, all the things that go into that. But I saw it as a really unique opportunity to own a piece of real property that was tied to, be able to get into direct ownership of the oil and gas that is potentially produced and sold. So that I've done that side of the business for the past 10 years. Again, started out as an investor that morphed into a consulting practice where I perform valuations and appraisals, provide coaching and other mineral management services. And, just really have gotten into that space and really when I started out, I listened to podcasts, wanted to find a show that I could listen to learn more about the space. Because even though I was in the industry, the mineral rights side was very new. I didn't see anything out there, so I decided to start a show. So I'm the host of the Mineral Rights Podcast as well, where we have lots of resources for folks that are beginner investors, as well as people that maybe have inherited these types of rights and want to learn how to manage them and make the most of that asset. So yeah, that's what I do.
So let's back it up for myself and for our listeners. What the heck are mineral rights? You mentioned oil, I think earlier, but what is it? Everything underground, and what is that typically?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's the rights to the things that are underground that are valuable. So when you have the potential to mine or extract oil and gas with a well, the rights to profit from that portion of the land is called the mineral rights. And that is part of the bundle of sticks that many of your listeners are probably familiar with that you get when you buy a piece of property. There's things like all the things that they're familiar with, that you all are familiar with from a land perspective on the surface rights. But then one of the other sticks in that bundle is the rights to the resources that are below the ground. And that's what we call the mineral rights. And a lot of times that can be part of a piece of property that you purchase if they own all of the rights, if they own the fee simple interest, both the surface and the subsurface rights, or you can just go and invest directly into the mineral rights. They may have been severed many years ago by an owner that decided to keep them. Maybe a well was drilled and they wanted to keep receiving royalty payments. They decided to sell the farm or the ranch, but then they retained the mineral rights. And so that's how they can be, all different flavors there from, you buy both the land, the surface and the minerals, or you could buy just the minerals or different iterations thereof. So it's, a very interesting part of the land side.
So when we're typically acquiring land, does it come packaged together with the below surface resources as well, or do we sort of treat these as always two separate items? And you mentioned that you can sever it. So on typically, does that include the sort of mineral rights as well?
It can. The thing that you'll find, I think, usually if you're in an area with a lot of oil and gas activity where those mineral rights are very valuable, most savvy landowners at some point will have decided, maybe again, that example where maybe they homesteaded the land, they patented the land, they got all the rights from the government. They've got out of farming, people moved to the city, the family decided to sell the farm or ranch and retain the mineral rights. That's an example in my family. My great grandfather was a cattle rancher in Wyoming, and so he had a small cattle ranch that he owned both the surface and the mineral rights. When he retired and moved to Arizona, he sold the ranch, but then he retained the minerals. And so I remember my grandfather getting and my grandmother getting small royalty checks each month from gas that was sold. There was a gas well where the ranch used to be, and so that is a typical situation. I would say there's other cases where it very may well have included the mineral rights with the land. You just would have to run title and find out through that chain of title what has occurred to figure out exactly what you own and, if you might own the minerals or not. So
now, how do you even figure out like if a property has valuable mineral rights tied to it? That sounds like a pretty exhaustive kind of process to me.
It can be. There's also, a lot of clues that you can use. So it's kind of like playing Sherlock Holmes and trying to understand when you're doing the due diligence in a piece of property, what are the potential uses of that piece of property? One of the uses could be to extract oil and gas below the ground. And it may not be that it has to occur directly on the surface of that tract that you're purchasing. It may be 2 miles away that they're drilling the surface location and they're going to go horizontal and they'll go 2 miles below the ground under your piece of land that you're buying. And if you own the mineral rights, you might actually benefit from the extraction of the oil and gas that's there and get the ability to receive a royalty payment. So it just, you'd have to go and do some due diligence. It's very simple. Anybody can do it. It's just a matter of going within that state where the property is located, researching the piece of property in the State Oil and Gas Commission website, seeing what type of activity is going on. Definitely the most common type of mineral that's extracted is oil and gas. There are other minerals you mentioned at the beginning. What are the other types of things? It can be rare earth minerals, which is something we're hearing a lot about in the news because of our reliance on China for those critical minerals that we need for, semiconductors, for electronics. Lithium is a big one. All the batteries that we have in our electric cars and cell phones and all of that requires a lot of lithium. And so there's a big boom in Southwest Arkansas, for example, where they're looking to drill wells to extract brine, which is basically that salt that's in the water, and they extract one of the salts is lithium, and so they extract the lithium, pump the water back down, and then they process it and things like that. And so you can people that own the mineral rights in those areas are looking at potentially profiting from leasing those minerals, both for oil and gas extraction as well as lithium, and then again getting a royalty, from the production of those things. So.
Are there sort of any like high level, easy to spot telltale signs that, hey, there may be mineral rights here and it's probably worth my time? What are those?
Yeah, I'd say the signs show up when you're doing the due diligence on a piece of property. When you're running title and you look at those in that chain of title, if you see oil and gas leases under that person's name or anyone, prior to them in that chain of title, where you're looking at the deeds and the mineral rights haven't been, excuse me, where the mineral rights haven't been severed or retained by the previous owner, if they've been conveyed each time, there's no mention of them, in other words, and then you see an oil and gas lease show up down the road, that could be a sign that the property might include the minerals.
Gotcha. So you talk about royalties here. What do you mean by royalties? And what sort of income potential are we talking about here?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really depends. So royalties are When you own a piece of property that owns it has the mineral rights, or when you purchase mineral rights that have been severed, you have the right to go and develop or drill a well and receive the benefits from that. Most people don't have the technical skills nor the capital to go and drill their own well, and so they basically outsource that to an Exxon Mobil or to Oxy or one of these or a smaller company to go and spend the $5 to $10 million to go drill a well and then produce the oil and gas and sell it, and all the technical and complex and lots of safety considerations with all the oil and gas production facilities and all of that. As a mineral owner, what you can do is basically convey the right to drill to a oil company through an oil and gas lease. When you do that in the lease, it'll specify the royalty rate that you would receive from the sale of any oil and gas that's sold, or any other valuable minerals for that matter. And that royalty rate can range from 12.5% to 25% typically. And you would receive your proportional share of the proceeds from the sale of oil and gas as a royalty owner. So if you own the mineral rights, you've leased those rights to an oil company to drill a well. They'll send you a monthly check, as they produce the oil and sell it. So it's, you hear the term mailbox money that goes along with owning minerals and royalties. It's just that kind of passive income that you get from, receiving those checks. So that's sort of what it means. And again, there's sort of two major events, two income producing events. One, when you lease the minerals, you can get paid basically the upfront rent for them to go and explore, to drill, whatever. That's through what's called a paid up oil and gas lease. So they'll pay you for the 2 to 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is for them to go and hold that lease and then do all of the engineering and due diligence and get everything lined up with permits and then go drill the well. If the well is successful, that lease will extend into the secondary term. And then as they sell oil and gas, you'll receive the royalty payment as specified in the lease.
All right, so it's the same for people in mineral rights as well and land investing. We are looking to prospect land and acquire land. And, there's a lot of things that need to be done when we're sort of following up, tracking the property, getting everything organized. And that's exactly what Pebble is all about. In fact, we've helped the mineral rights companies also who use Pebble to find properties with mineral rights. Anyways, if you're looking for a system to help you streamline, to help you systemize, to help you follow up and run automations, look no further. There is Pebble REI. That's the platform that myself and my co-founder Kevin have founded. This is a system built from the ground up. If you'd like to see what we've been working on, head over to our YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/Pebble REI. Every single month, Kevin and I go live sharing the things that we're working on with this platform. But one thing I do want to make sure you understand here, how Pebble sort of differentiates from other platforms is that we are very property centric. Most systems, most CRMs are going to be contact or lead based. But when we're looking at the structure or the way that we run our business, everything from acquiring to doing something with that property to tracking marketing and project management and then offloading, everything is backed against the property record. It's not the contact. It's not the lead. And the great thing is once those leads come in, the property record already exists inside of Pebble. Those get bundled together and you're sort of managing that property through the entire deal flow. And that's where Pebble really separates itself from any other system. And we're talking also other things like auto follow-ups, an amazing direct mailing system, be able to conduct your due diligence, like you can look up flood zones, wetlands, and road access, all of that is baked inside this one platform to keep everything centralized, to keep your entire land business focused in one place. Anyways, if you're interested in learning more, head over to pebblerei.com, hit the book a demo, jump on a call with us, get an understanding of what Pebble is, and start systemizing so you can grow your business. Anyways, enjoy the rest of this episode here with Matt Sands. So are there sort of rough figures what can that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it really totally depends on the specific piece of property. Just for the sake of an example, if you owned 100% of the mineral rights under an oil and gas well, and it let's say you have 12.5% lease, just for the sake of argument. If that well produces $100,000, from the sale of oil and gas, then you get 12.5% of that, or $12,500 in that month. Of course, it's usually a lot smaller than that, because these pieces of property and the minerals have been subdivided over generations as they're handed down, from one generation to the next, and multiple children and things like that. So you may have 1/12 or 1/100th of the full undivided interest in that particular tract of land. So it's really kind of that combination of, what is the footprint, or the amount of minerals that are being drained by that well, and what percentage you own of the minerals under that well, and then your mineral royalty rate.
So this sounds like it can get really complicated. What if that some of that mineral is also under other parcels as well, not just yours? How the heck do they figure out you get this much and the other person gets this much?
Yeah, it can get complex, certainly in case by case scenario. But I think most of the time, it's, if you think about it, this term that's really important to understand with minerals is called pooling. That's POOLING, and that's where multiple tracts and multiple mineral owners are pooled together to form a full unit. So if you consider 100% of the minerals, you might have 10 different owners, you might have 100, 200 owners. It just depends on how things have been handed down over the generations. But you need to know that what fraction you own, as well as that lease royalty rate. And then there's some other things that are pretty basic in terms of when that well is drilled. They'll designate, okay, this is going to pull from, or we'll pull two sections of land together to drill a 2-mile long horizontal well. So maybe it's 1,280 acres, from the surface footprint. If you're looking at it from an airplane view, that's the land that is pooled together. And again, just depending on the tract that you own within that 1,280 acre unit, and your fractional ownership of that will determine. It's just simple math. It's just literally, if you owned 10 net mineral acres. So if that's basically, if you had, let's say, minerals under that full 1,280 acres, but your net ownership is 10 acres out of the 1,280, or 1/128th. In other words, that's, you literally just multiply that fraction times your royalty rate, and then times whatever the production, and then the commodity price that they sell the oil or gas for. And that's how you'd figure out how much you would be owed in royalties.
That's super interesting. In terms of figuring out, your royalties and what you own and all that. To me, that looks, wow. I don't know how that's done, but it seems like there's a process to this. So my follow-up question to that is, is this sort of a one-off thing for most people, or do people try to do this at scale, like acquire more and more to get more of these royalty checks? Is this a real thing?
Yeah, it's really grown. I would say in the past 10 years, there's a lot of private equity money that's come into this space. There's large shops that go and aggregate minerals in very desirable areas. So the business model for most professional mineral buyers, that are well capitalized, they'll have a team that is going out and making phone calls to mineral owners, similar to what I think your listeners do from a prospecting situation. You're sending direct mail, you're making phone calls, and then you'll get a hit, somebody that's potentially interested in selling. You'll do the due diligence on that piece of property, make them an offer based on that future income generating potential for the use. In this case, the use is going to be for hopefully an oil and gas well to be drilled. But the model for these companies is to, a term that's used is to buy ahead of the drill bit. So what you're looking for is basically line of sight to near-term development, so you can get a quick return on your investment. And the way you figure that out is basically looking for mineral rights under a well permit. So existing permits that have been filed with the State Oil and Gas Commission by a company, they'll have to get approval before they go and drill a well. You can research where those well permits are located, and then contact the mineral owners underneath those wells, and then see if you can get somebody that's interested in selling. And then, then in that case, it's very straightforward to forecast the income generation potential, the cash flow from that based on the likelihood of that well getting drilled. There's a lot of things that go into it. Obviously, it's very nuanced, but you can figure out if this company has a good track record of doing what they say they are going to do. Once they get permits, they actually go and drill the wells. And those permits are usually good for 2 to 3 years. So you figure you're going to see a well get drilled, hopefully in the next 2 to 3 years. And from that, you can look at all of the other wells that have been drilled in that area and come up with a pretty reliable forecast for what these future wells might look like from, that future oil and gas potential. And all of that is just a discounted cash flow analysis that you look at those future royalty payments discounted back to today to figure out what that property is worth to you based on your target, discount rate. So,
got you. Now, so yeah, you're saying there's a lot of private equity in this. Larger size companies are getting into this. We, as land investors, work all over the map. I'm certain that most of you guys are focused in certain areas. Which states, so our listeners know that there's potential, which states would you say are quite common with mineral rights?
Yeah, I mean, Texas is probably the big one. It's kind of the most obvious in the Permian Basin. So West Texas land itself, I don't know how valuable the surface rights are necessarily, but the mineral rights below the ground can be extremely valuable on the order of $20,000 to $30,000 per net mineral acre. Oftentimes, well exceeding the value of the surface. All the way to there's other parts where more speculative investment, it may be only worth $50 per net acre, $100 or $500 or whatever. But again, it's all tied to that relative income generating potential. So yeah, it just really depends. But other states that come to mind, Oklahoma is another big one. Colorado, believe it or not, Northeast Colorado and the Denver-Julesburg Basin, Wyoming. You have North Dakota with the Bakken play, which is a big one. Utah is a great one in the Uinta Basin, sort of that kind of northeast Utah. And then, various states that you hear about in the news, in Appalachia and Pennsylvania, Ohio are big. Louisiana, for sure. Arkansas has got a little bit. Certainly lithium is big in Arkansas right now. But yeah, just all across the map, you'd be surprised if you looked at the oil and gas production. There's many states that have oil and gas production that maybe you didn't know about, or that could have some potential there. But certainly it's pretty easy to see. Go to the State Oil and Gas Commission if you're looking at wherever you're focusing your efforts on investing. If you want to explore the income generating potential of the mineral rights. Again, just go to the State Oil and Gas Commission website. You can see where the wells are located and what kind of production, and you see where their permits and all of that, and kind of, hone in on where you might want to look at. But yeah, that's definitely, it can be across the board, really.
Mm. You mentioned about, I find this whole concept so interesting, sort of severing the surface from the below there. What happens once you're done extracting the minerals and the resources below ground? Do you have to pay taxes for that ownership? What do you do with that? Once it's been drained of its resources, what typically happens with it?
Yeah, so that's from a mineral owner perspective. It's really unique because it's a typically non-cost bearing. So that means you don't deal with the expenses of drilling the well, nor operating, nor the cost to plug and abandon the well once that well is at the end of its life. So you're just getting the royalty payments off of that. So from the minerals. Now there's the other side of it. It gets very complex, and I think it'd be a whole episode we could do on the different types of ownership. But the other side of that, the people you lease the minerals to, that working interest, the expense side, there's tax benefits to that. There's all kinds of things, but it gets very complex. And, you have the expense of, the operations, the drilling of the well, participating in that, and then the expense of plugging it. But the great thing about mineral rights is it's, by definition, it's part of the real property. It's generally speaking perpetual in nature. Now, some states have dormant mineral statutes, which means that the mineral interest can revert back to the surface owner if nothing is done after a certain period of time. So that is possible in those states where if after a well gets plugged and abandoned and they reclaim the surface, that it would end up, going back to a situation where you would have to, I don't know if you're hearing that in the background. Let me close my, yeah, I'm getting Windows notifications for email here. But so basically what you end up dealing with is, typically that well gets plugged and abandoned, and you, as the mineral owner, if the interest is perpetual in nature, that particular well may have been plugged or that formation been drained, but there could be other deeper formations out there that they come in later to drill, and you would benefit from that whole new cycle of development. You would lease your minerals again. You get the royalties from those new wells that are drilled. Again, if you have those perpetual mineral rights, which is, I think, a huge benefit to this asset class. And, this is something that we've seen. A great example is West Texas, right? There's a rich history of oil and gas production in the state, in that part of the state, in the Permian Basin. Back 100 years ago, they were drilling vertical wells into shallower formations. A lot of those wells are still producing today, but, some of them have been plugged and nothing happened for, who knows, 40, 50 years. But then now with the shale boom, they're coming and drilling these very prolific, long horizontal wells, oftentimes, 20 plus wells per section. And then, you're getting significant royalty payments from that. And again, if you had just held on to those, if those are passed down to the generations, those people that are, have inherited those interests are benefiting from that now.
So as land investors, why wouldn't they do this? Why wouldn't they just go and say, buy some land in Texas or wherever, sever it from the surface, just sell off the surface and hang on to a bunch of below surface rights? I have nothing to lose, right? Is that correct? I don't know. That might sort of devalue the property itself when you do that, but am I correct by saying that? Like, you could possibly do that?
You could, yeah, certainly. If you buy a piece of property that has the mineral rights with it, I think it's a good idea. And certainly from my perspective, I always try to hold on to those. Even, right now there's not a lot of value. And certainly if you paid just for the value of the surface rights, and then the person you're selling it to is really only interested in the surface, you definitely should keep the mineral rights and hold on to them, in case something happens in the future. There's obviously some things you need to be aware of. Again, back to the dormant mineral statutes, you may have to do some certain things to be able to protect or retain those rights. But there's, the thing in that you may find, and certainly in areas that have a lot of oil and gas activity, is those minerals may have been severed already. Or the surface owner is savvy and they want to retain those, and so you may not get them. But it certainly can be done. And you could, if you're in that situation where you find a piece of property and the minerals are included, it makes a lot of sense to me to sever those, either through get with your attorney to get specific advice for your situation, but that can be done a couple of different ways, whether you do it beforehand or you do it as part of the deed that conveys the surface, but you retain the minerals. You just have to be explicit one way or another when you do that, and your attorney can help you.
Yeah. Matt, one more question here. Give us the wildest, most profitable mineral rights deal or that you've ever sort of seen someone stumble into or you stumbled into.
Yeah, so I have a couple of clients that I worked with that come from different backgrounds. One, in particular, he is a commercial real estate agent, invests in mineral in mobile home parks, and was very familiar with that type of investing. Got interested in learning about minerals and royalties. I was coaching him, helped him learn, the due diligence process. He was very familiar with making calls and sort of the prospecting side of things, and was very successful at that. He found somebody that was willing to sell, and we offer them a fair price. And we had a kind of a conservative economic model, based on what that potential development was going to be. The specific situation was, I think there was 5 or 6 wells that were producing, and there was maybe 5 or 6 permits, so brand new wells that were going to be drilled. We were pretty conservative, saying, well, we're going to assume those get drilled, 2-3 years in the future. Ends up they were drilled next year. He got 30-40% cash on cash yield from that. And the great thing with these horizontal wells that are being drilled today is that you get probably good 50 to 70% of the production over the first couple of years of those wells. So they're very steep decline rates, but it means the very initial first few months get very high peak production rates, and then it declines very steeply, and then it kind of shallows out and goes kind of more, shallow and kind of steady as you go for 20, 30 years in the future. But you get a good portion of that return back, and so yeah, we made our money back on that deal very shortly after that. That particular transaction, I think within the first year and a half, that investment had paid for itself. And now we're getting those royalty payments every month. But that was, I think, it's one of those things where you find a diamond in a rough. There's a lot of things out there. People are willing to sell their minerals, but then it's what's colloquially termed as goat pasture in the industry. In other words, it's really not very valuable. Nothing is probably ever going to happen to it. So you wouldn't want to pay very much, if anything, for those. But again, if you can buy the surface and just retain those minerals, and then who knows, down the road maybe you'll get the lottery ticket and you'll get leased, and a well will get drilled and you'll get those. But I wouldn't bet on it. Certainly don't go out there expecting to get rich doing that. I think it's being very strategic, very intentional about the areas you're going to purchase minerals. And then it's probably like you all see on the land investing side, it's a numbers game. Maybe you have a 1% success rate, but over time that can add up and be very lucrative. So,
well, I know you're helping others sort of understand this space. Help us understand, you've got the podcast, the Mineral Rights Podcast, but you've also got a whole course on this. Where can people connect with you, learn a little bit more about that, and what is it about?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thanks. You can go to the Mineral Rights Podcast. So mineralrightspodcast.com. That's, mineralrightspodcast.com. And you can look at there. You'll have our full catalog of episodes. I'm going to create a resource guide for your listeners that has kind of a curated list of episodes where we focus on investing in minerals. And so if you go to mineralrightspodcast.com/land investing, that'll take you to that resource guide that you can download for free, and it'll link you to those episodes, and there'll be some more information about that. And then on the website, and we'll link to, I think we talked about, you'll maybe link to that in the show notes as well, but you can go to the link in the show notes. It'll link you to my course, and I have some more information about the course related to the land investing side of things. So basically, the course teaches you about the different types of mineral rights, different types of oil and gas rights, how all of that works. Most of your listeners are probably familiar with the PLSS and reading legal descriptions, but we go into, how to read a legal description, how to find that piece of property on the state oil and gas website to figure out what type of activity is going on, and how to find, and what information you need to really focus on within that state oil and gas website to really hone in on the income producing potential for that piece of property. So basically, it's both the basic due diligence steps you would need to do to invest in a mineral property, and also the basic things you need to know as a mineral owner in order to properly understand what you own and properly manage it. So kind of a dual benefit there if you get into this side of the business. And then again, I provide some one-on-one coaching if you find these resources, they're helpful, get you started. You just want somebody to kind of help hold your hand through that first couple of deals and help you run the economics and understand that side of the business. But yeah, you can just go again to mineralrightspodcast.com. You can click on the links there. You can email me, listen to the show, and we have a bunch of information about all aspects of investing and managing these types of interests.
Amazing. Well, Matt, thanks so much for sharing your world in the land space, let's call it, a completely underground world that we're totally not familiar with. So you guys listening, you know where you can connect with Matt. Matt, thanks so much for taking time of your schedule to come onto the show.
Yeah, thanks again for having me, and it was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. All right, take care and cheers.
You too.
Before you stop this episode or hit the next episode, I want to personally thank you for listening to this episode of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast by Pebble. If you found this helpful, we'd greatly appreciate any awesome reviews and ratings on whichever platform you are listening to this on. And if you have 2 minutes and wanted to step it up even more and help others, feel free to share this in other Facebook groups or pages or any communities, giving others a heads up of the Land Investing Business Secrets podcast or the specific episode that may help them on their land investing journey. Once again, thanks so much for listening, and catch you on our next episode.